My name is Linnea Anderson. On behalf of the First Fridays Committee and the Archives and Special Collections Department, welcome to First Fridays. And this season's theme is Matters of the Heart. And today's presentations will also be posted later on the University of Minnesota Library's YouTube channel. First Fridays is a monthly series of presentations made possible by a generous gift from Governor Elmer L. Anderson and Mrs. Eleanor Anderson in honor of former library director Dr. Edward B. Stanford. The presentations are based on materials in the University Library's archives and special collections. A special thank you to the interpreters from Middle English who will be providing ASL interpretation for today's presentations. And if time allows, we will have a question and answer session at the end. Zoom audience members, if you have any questions for our speakers today, please submit them using the Q&A function and not the chat so that we can keep track of them. In-person audience, please hold your questions until the end. And there will be a tour after the presentations with Chris. At this point, we pause for the land acknowledgement. The University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It is important to acknowledge the peoples on whose land we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen our relations with tribal nations. We also acknowledge that words are not enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for Native American students, staff, faculty, and community members. So our presentations today feature the James Ford Bell Library and Special Collections and Rare Books. And the first presentation is Heart-Shaped Worlds at the James Ford Bell Library, presented by Anne Good, Assistant Curator of the James Ford Bell Library. In the 16th century, as knowledge of the world grew and map makers developed new drafting methods, a handful of scholars experimented with an unusual way of seeing and describing the world. This peculiar new cartographic description was the cordiform, or heart-shaped map projection. These include some of the oldest maps in the James Ford Bell Library.
Just make sure I've got everything in the right place. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As you heard, I'm the Assistant Curator of the James Ford Bell Library. Our collection was founded by James Ford Bell in 1953. He was a longtime regent of the University of Minnesota and also the founder of General Mills. As a successful businessman, Mr. Bell was particularly interested in the history of trade worldwide. The collection that he started with 600 rare books and maps has continued to grow over the last 70 years to some 40,000 items, books, maps, manuscripts, archival materials, and smaller printed works. These materials document the history and impact of trade and cultural exchange worldwide before about 1825. So my presentation today is about a particular type of map that was created in the 16th century and of which only a few examples still exist today. These are cordiform or heart-shaped maps from the Latin word cor, which means heart. So the 16th century was a time of a lot of experimentation in cartography or map making. For one thing, the European discovery of the Americas meant that former conceptions of the world had to be completely rethought. And then, as more and more Europeans traveled across the world, knowledge of the world overall increased, and map makers were kept very busy. But the history of cartography isn't just about the creation of increasingly detailed or accurate maps. Maps carried a great deal of symbolic value. In the early period of cartography, relatively few maps could really have been used for navigating or getting from point A to point B. Instead, for example, they might project an idea of power that a patron wanted to have displayed, or they could facilitate what one cartographer from the 16th century called mind traveling. That's venturing to unknown lands without ever leaving your library. Maps could mean many things to many people. The cordiform maps, as we shall see, are certainly entangled with all of these 16th century concepts and developments, new discoveries, territorial claims, technical experimentation, symbolic value. What would it be like to contemplate a map and at the same time, the inner workings of your heart? So first, let's consider some of the technical history. This type of map was a distinctive way of trying to solve the puzzle of how to project a round globe onto a flat surface. Mathematical cartographical concepts were first proposed by Ptolemy, a 2nd century Greek scholar who lived in Alexandria, in his work called Geographie, or Geography, obviously. When this work was rediscovered in the 14th century, none of the extant manuscripts included maps. So beginning with the printed volumes in the late 15th century, scholars added maps, attempting to translate Ptolemy's mathematical models into images. The cordiform maps are based on what is called Ptolemy's second projection. This was a mathematical projection that bulged in the middle and curved up at the top right and left corners. So somewhat like a horseshoe, or also like a heart. The earliest cordiform printed map is in an edition of Ptolemy's Geography from 1511. This very large volume, with the full title, and I'll give the title in English, A Book of Geography with tables and a universal figure, that's the universal figure, and with the addition of places discovered by later authors, carefully revised and printed. So this large volume relies on a translation of the original Ptolemaic text from Greek into Latin by the medieval scholar Jacopo de Angelo, who lived from 1360 to 1411. This 1511 edition, however, includes additional notes by Bernardus Sylvanus, whose dates aren't known, but whose work is known from about 1465 to 1511, who intended to update Ptolemy's classic work. Sylvanus was the map maker and publisher of this new and innovative map. Following a full set of traditional Ptolemaic maps, which they have a particular look to them, this unique cordiform is the last one in the volume. The map is notable not only for its heart shape, but also because it is just the second map to depict Japan. Let me see if I can zoom in on this for you. Up here, so this right here. Yep. So just the second map to depict Japan, which is Zampagu Insula on the upper right side. And also one of the earliest to show any part of the Americas, or what was then called the New World. Scoot it over here. And these parts here are the Americas. It was printed from carved wood blocks, and also employs a very rare two-colored printing, the red and the black together. And note of course, the cool personified wind heads. And then over here, the zodiacal signs for the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn and the equator on the right side of the map. Now, one of the things that map historians argue about is what shape should actually be considered cordiform. Although I'm a bit of a skeptic myself on some of these, I can see how the intention of the mathematical projection would classify these maps together. Between 1511 and about 1580, several versions of these types of cordiform maps were published. And these can be categorized a bit more generally in three ways. True cordiform maps. These look like Valentine's Day hearts. Truncated cordiforms. They're usually flattened at the bottom or extended lengthwise east to west. And double cordiform maps. These are considered more fanciful by some historians. They show the two hemispheres separately, each a cordiform projection centered on the poles. So, although the 1511 map by Sylvanus in Ptolemy's geography seems very heart-shaped to me, it actually falls into the truncated category. There are only two, or perhaps three. The third is only known in a later copy. So there are only two or three true cordiform maps that exist, and they're only known in one or two copies, sadly not in our library. These were created by Peter Appian in 1530 and by Laurence Finet in about 1531. And his is perhaps based on that earlier, now lost manuscript from 1519 that he also drew. Truncated cordiforms are somewhat more common, though still rare. They include a 1520 map by Peter Appian, who lived from 1495 to 1552. And this is inserted in an edition of the Narratives of Solinus. Solinus was a 3rd century Roman geographer. Note then that Appian experimented with the cordiform projection with at least 3 different cordiform charts. This one has the distinction of also being the second oldest map to use the name America for the new continent. And let me zoom in on that a little bit for you. Here, America. And then he tells us also in the title of this map up here that he got his information from the letters of Amerigo Vespucci. A second set of similar truncated cordiform maps were made by Johannes Honter, who lived from 1498 to 1549, and is published in his De Cosmographiae Rudimentis, which is on the rudiments of cosmography, in 1546, and then the map is again published in 1561. The edition published, let me move this a little bit, published posthumously in Basel in 1561, is part of a collection of other cosmographical and geographical texts. Hunter was from Transylvania and is often credited with founding the Lutheran Church there. During the period of the Reformation in the late 1530s, he was also an engraver and carved the wood blocks for the maps included in his works in geography. And if you look at this, you can see that this one is fairly primitive and this one is a lot more detailed. Verses accompanied the maps intended to help students remember concepts and places. This cordiform map, first published nearly 40 years after Sylvanus's, is more detailed with regard to the Americas, but note that if you wrap it around, India or Asia is still connected to the New World. So they had no concept of the whole continent. So now let's bring some symbolic characteristics of these maps more closely into focus. When the history of cartography started as a field of study in the early 20th century, cordiform maps were viewed simply as novelties and charming curiosities. It was only in the late 1990s that the Italian cultural historian Giorgio Mangani looked carefully at a singular cordiform map by Abraham Ortelius, who lived from 1527 to 1598, and recognized what it might represent. And I'm going to show you this slide. We don't own this map, and I couldn't find good images online, so please bear with me for a moment. It doesn't look very good. So Ortelius belonged to a dissenting Protestant group called the Family of Love, or Familists, which used the image of a stylized human heart, so not a Valentine's heart, but a human heart, right? To subtly identify themselves as a group. So thus, by choosing the heart shape for his map, Mangani argued, Ortelius signaled, but only to those who knew the symbols, his religious beliefs, as well as his political stance in the Netherlands at the time. Jerry Broughton helped to publicize this interesting interpretation in his A History of the World in 12 Maps, published in 2012. He extended the idea to other 16th century map makers, in particular to Gerhard Mercator's life. So Mercator lived almost the same years as Ortelius. He died in 1594. In relation to Mercator's creation of a double cordiform map, Broughton stated that to make a heart-shaped map in the first half of the 16th century was a clear statement of religious dissent. This is because the symbolism of the heart shape automatically invited viewers to consider their own inner world and hidden emotions, to look to their conscience. In this way, Broughton also goes beyond the symbolism of the family of love and that specific context, and shows the heart as a human's inner instrument of discernment. The Bell does not have a copy of the double cordiform map that Mercator created, but the Borchert Library here at the U has, I think, 2 facsimile copies of it. And the Bell's 1550 double cordiform map by the Spanish-born Roman mapmaker Antonio Salamanca, using the technology of copper plate engraving rather than a woodblock, is a nearly direct copy of Mercator's double cordiform. Now, Mercator was actually copying somebody else. So Mercator's cordiform was based on the work of Oronce Finet, who we've heard before with the true cordiform, who worked at the court of Francis I, King of France. Religious dissent may also have guided Finet in the creation of the new type of cordiform map in about 1531. This double cordiform map, showing the hemispheres, the northern on the left and the southern on the right, split at the equator. Finet was a mathematician, astrologer, philosopher, and theologian. He was arrested briefly in 1523, probably because he was suspected of heretical teaching. But religious dissent was not the focus of Finet's life. Another cartographic historian named Ruth Watson argues that we have to see the possible religious or spiritual symbolism of the heart-shaped maps in dialogue with other cultural representations. She connects images of hearts, again, human hearts, not Valentine's hearts. She connects images of hearts in the 16th century to ideas of kingship and royal power. We can see this, for example, in this truncated cordiform from 1544, again by Peter Appian, so this is his 3rd cordiform, showing Charles V seated next to Apollo at the top of the map, explicitly connecting the heart-shaped world to the aspirations of universal monarchy. So in reconsidering Finet's map, We can also see that he was appealing to his patrons' desire to project French power across the globe when he created this novel double cordiform projection. He was rewarded for his efforts with the position of royal lecturer at the newly founded College of France. But Watson is not saying that religion is just a cloak for politics, but rather she wants to show that symbols can carry a variety of meanings, and that our understandings of these maps are enriched when we can see them all, or many of them. So quite apart from religious or political connotations, let me zoom in again here. It's super hard to see. Finet's map also depicts some of the most recent geographical discoveries of the early 16th century, in particular, a peninsula called Florida. Super hard to see, it's here. Yes, yes, it's a very strange projection, right? This was described by Juan Ponce de Leon in 1513, and then over here on the other hemisphere, over here, the South Pacific, here called Mare Magellanica, Mare Magellanicum, indicating the first circumnavigation of the globe by members of the expedition that was led by Ferdinand Magellan, although he didn't make it back home. They returned to Europe in 1522. So although few in number, cordiform maps were never just pleasant curiosities. We have seen that they were technical achievements from the standpoint of the mathematical projections used, the incorporation of new geographical knowledge, and the artistry that went into the woodblock carvings or copperplate engravings. They also carried considerable symbolic power related to religious dissent, political aspirations, and the inner workings of the human heart. None of these things are specifically about love, which is what people in the 21st century think about when we see hearts. So it is fascinating that in 1633, at least 50 years after the maps we have been discussing were published, the English poet John Donne published The Good Morrow, a poem that surely refers to a double cordiform map. In the second and third stanzas, see if you can discern the two halves of the world, two hearts, reflecting the connection of the lover's two souls. I'll read it to you. I wonder, by my troth, what thou and I did till we loved. Were we not weaned till then, but sucked on country pleasures childishly? Or snorted we in the seven sleepers' den? 'Twas so. But this all pleasure's fancies be. If ever any beauty I did see, which I desired and got, 'twas but a dream of thee. And now, good morrow to our waking souls, which watch not one another out of fear, for love, all love of other sights controls, and makes one little room and everywhere. Let sea discoverers to new worlds have gone. Let maps to other worlds on worlds have shown. Let us possess one world. Each hath one and is one. My face in thine eye, thine in mine appears, and true plain hearts do in the faces rest. Where can we find two better hemispheres? Without sharp north, without declining west. Whatever dies was not mixed equally. If our two loves be one, or thou and I, love so alike, that none do slacken, none can die. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Our second presentation is A Fine Romance, a celebration of fine press books, presented by Marguerite Ragnow, curator of the James Ford Bell Library and interim curator of special collections and rare books. Love abounds in the collection of fine press books in special collections and rare books. These limited 20th century editions emphasize topography and illustration. In the words of the romantic song by Jerome Kern and Dorothy Fields, they are lovely to look at, delightful to hold.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I've shared the collection of the James Ford Bell Library with you at First Fridays for almost 20 years. But today I'm wearing a new hat. I'm still curator of the James Ford Bell Library, but in October of last year, I became interim curator of special collections and rare books. Tim Johnson is taking phased retirement. He's still curator of Sherlock Holmes collection. But for the past 6 months, I've been learning special collections and rare books, and it is no small task. As some of you may know, Special Collections and Rare Books is the library's general collection of rare books, manuscripts, archival materials, special collections, and other realia. In contrast to more specialized collections like the Trutter Collection, Curlin Collection, Upper Midwest Literary Archives, and of course the James Ford Bell Library, among others. It is a very eclectic collection with strengths in the history of photomechanics, ballooning, military history ranging from the US colonial era through the Napoleonic Wars and up to Vietnam. SCRB, or SCRIB as I call it, also includes a wide range of materials supporting the study of the history of the book, from cuneiform and papyri, medieval and early modern manuscripts, early printed books or incunabula, and the output of small, private, and fine presses from the late 19th century through today, including the Whittington Press in England and the Midwest printer and woodblock artist Gaylord Shenelac and his press Midnight Paper Sales. In the realm of fine press books, we have considerable riches, but for the purposes of this talk and its theme of love, I've focused on just a few titles that fit the theme. So, what are fine press books? I'm glad you asked. In general, fine press books have been produced as much for their physical beauty as for their content. The bindings are often specially designed, the paper frequently handmade. Sometimes a special font is designed just for a particular small press that specializes in fine press books. These books are highly designed. Their pages often have wide margins, and important artists are often commissioned to illustrate them. They are a reflection of love for the physical bound book or codex, which we have treasured since the Middle Ages, and for the love of the book arts, typography, papermaking, binding, illustration, and design. And as Linnea mentioned, paraphrasing songwriter Jerome Cohn and Dorothy Fields, they are lovely to look at and delightful to hold. And I really should be making this presentation as a show and tell, because fine press books are as much a tactile experience as they are a visual one. Fine press books are grounded in the history of the arts and crafts movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. One of the leaders of the movement, William Morris, decided to counter the industrialization of book production, cheap wood pulp paper, modest bindings, and little to no design, by reviving the crafts of letterpress printing, printmaking, binding, etc. He founded the Kelmscott Press in England in 1891, apparently inspired by a talk he heard by a gentleman named Emery Walker called letterpress printing at the November 1888 meeting of the Arts and Crafts Exhibit Society. Walker was one of the men who joined him in the printing venture, but Morris was known to have had a hand in every aspect of production, from designing type fonts to sourcing the custom-made paper. The first book Kelmscott printed was one Morris wrote himself, titled The Story of the Glittering Plain, which has been also called The Land of Living Men or The Acre of the Undying. It sounds cheery. It was printed in a limited edition of 200 copies on paper and 6 copies on vellum. Morris also designed a distinctive printer's mark for the press, which featured his own font design, the foliage for which he is now well known, and his own name. And if we go back here, the poster represents some of the fabric he designed. And if you're into housing design and decoration today, you can buy draperies, placemats, carpet, upholstery, and wallpaper using William Morris's designs. It is all over the place. Of the many Kelmscott editions that we have, I've chosen the poems of John Keats. You can see once again the elaborate foliage decoration and the arts and crafts design. The interior type font is much more legible, and you can see the wide margins used in the page design. And to read just a bit of the poem, Cynthia, where art thou now? What far abode of green or silvery bower doth enshrine such utmost beauty? Alas, thou dost pine for one as sorrowful. Thy cheek is pale for one whose cheek is pale. Thou dost bewail his tears who weeps for thee. Where dost thou sigh? Ah, surely that light peeps from Vesper's eye. Or, what a thing is love? Here you can see the binding, hand-bound and secured with interior leather straps, which you can just see on the top, and stamped with the title of the work in gold on the vellum spine. For the 7 years of its existence, the Kelmscott Press produced 53 works, comprising 66 volumes in limited press runs, averaging 300 copies each, as well as a set of specimen pages from Froissart's Chronicles, which were never completed. William Morris died in 1896. Books already in production were completed and the press closed in 1898. Despite its short life, the Kelmscott Press was tremendously influential on fine press publications for years to come, as we shall see. Next is a slim volume of poetry by Robert Browning entitled Men and Women, published in 1908 by the Doves Press. The book is open to a poem called A Lover's Quarrel. The third stanza reads, and I chose this one inspired by our recent weather. Dearest, 3 months ago, when we lived blocked up with snow, when the wind would edge in and in his wedge in as far as the point would go, not in our ingle, though, where we loved each the other so. The Doves Press itself was founded through an act of love. Newly married couple Anne Cobden Sanderson and Thomas Cobden Sanderson created a new last name by joining their 2 individual ones, Cobden and Sanderson. TJ, as he was known, was an unemployed barrister. And Anne, fearing that sloth and idleness would be detrimental to her husband's health as well as to their marriage, convinced him to become a bookbinder. Both Anne and TJ were part of the same circle of artists and craftspeople that included William Morris, with whom they were friends, and indeed Anne lived with the Morrises for a short time before her marriage. It was her husband TJ who is credited with coining the term arts and crafts, contributing much to the success of what became the arts and crafts movement. After 10 years as a bookbinder, TJ established his own bindery, Dove's Bindery, at Hammersmith, London in 1893, naming it after the tavern next door. Then in 1900, he founded the Doves Press with photographer, engraver, and printer Emery Walker, whom we've already heard about, who was a friend and colleague of William Morris and a member of the Arts and Crafts set. However, it was Anne, from her own funds, who backed the venture to the tune of £1,600. In today's money, that would be £251,317.16, or $326,200.72, not an insignificant gesture of love. TJ followed a strict arts and crafts style, even creating the Dove's Press type font, which you can see in the colophon pictured here. The font was drawn under Emery Walker's supervision, based on capital letters from the 15th century font of Nicholas Jensen. All of their books used this 16-point font. But unfortunately, TJ and Walker had a falling out, and Walker left the enterprise in 1906. TJ continued printing until 1916. Although TJ had promised Walker a set of the type fonts, their animosity toward one another won the day, and TJ threw the matrices and type blocks and all other evidence into the River Thames. So no one else could ever print using that font, though actually somebody is in the process of recreating it digitally now. Following TJ's death in 1922, Anne stepped up again and gave Walker a large settlement for his loss of the promised font. Another press inspired by the Kelmscott Press was the Shakespeare Head Press. It was founded by Arthur Henry Bullen in 1903. Bullen, a Shakespeare scholar who lectured on Elizabethan drama at Oxford University, was intent on producing fine editions in the tradition of Kelmscott, beginning with the collected works of William Shakespeare. This 8-volume edition of Chaucer was published by the press after his death in 1920, in collaboration with Oxford bookseller Basil Blackwell in 1929. You can see the influence of the arts and crafts style in the colophon. The fanciful text at the beginning of the Romance of the Rose was designed by renowned painter and calligrapher Jocelyn V. Gaskin, while the regular text was originally produced for the Globe edition of Chaucer and reused here. The Limited Editions Club was founded in 1929 by American George Macy. It began publishing illustrated books of limited numbers, usually 1,500 copies, for subscription members. His aim was to publish beautifully illustrated classic titles. From 1929 until 1985, the Limited Editions Club published 15 to 16 editions a year, culminating in about 548 titles. It was famous for original illustrations by the best book illustrators and artists of the day. Here are 3 examples by Fritz Kreidel, illustrations for this volume of Emma by Jane Austen. Kreidel was a German-born artist who emigrated to America in 1938. He illustrated 21 volumes for the Limited Edition Club, more than any other artist. Each title was unique, using special papers, special cover material, including leather. Almost all came in slipcases or clamshell boxes. Many of the titles were already regarded as classics and produced by small private presses around the world. Almost all were signed by either the illustrator, the author, the publisher, or the designer. And let's see if I can get... there we have Fritz Kreidel's signature on this copy. In 1935, Macy founded the Heritage Club, which together with the Heritage Press, created and distributed more affordable and unlimited reprints of the great books previously published by the Limited Editions Club. Now, we couldn't discuss fine press publications without including some Shakespeare, one of the most popular authors for fine press editions. Here we have an edition of A Midsummer Night's Dream, published in 1957 by the Folio Society. The Folio Society was founded by Charles Eade in 1947. Introduced to the work of William Morris and the Kelmscott Press in school, after his military service in World War II, instead of going to Oxford as he'd planned, he studied at the London School of Printing. The Folio Society became a publisher of high-quality illustrated books, mostly well-known works modeled on Kelmscott. Its aim was to offer, quote, editions of the world's great literature in a format worthy of the contents at a price within the reach of every man. Folio editions feature specially designed bindings and include artist-commissioned illustrations, mostly in the fiction title, or researched artworks and photography in the nonfiction titles. Here's the cover of a Folio Society edition of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, published in 1950. We have to include Romeo and Juliet in a program about love. And here we have Romeo, illustrated by French artist Jean Hugo opposite the title page. Romeo with Juliet. Hugo's drawings were engraved by his daughter, Valentine, for this particular edition. One of the characteristics of fine press books are detailed descriptions of the artists, how many copies, who designed the font type, what were the origins of the book, what kind of paper, all of those details, because the collectors in particular want to know those things. They collect not only the fine press books, but they collect the work of particular authors, or they collect examples of particular types of font styles. And so this information can be found in just about every fine press book that's been published. I thought it would be interesting to contrast the Folio Society edition with this edition of Romeo and Juliet, published in 1752. An entirely different look. We will end our whirlwind tour and much abbreviated tour of fine press publications with a look at a modern Midwestern fine press. Harry Duncan was one of the most influential figures in printing in the Midwest, first using the Abattoir Editions imprint in 1972, when he began teaching at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. He continued to use it until his retirement in 1985, when he reverted to his own press imprint. Abattoir Editions remains the fine press imprint of the university. And I will end with this close-up of the page edges, which offers but a glimpse of the tactile nature of many fine press publications. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Okay, so we have time for some questions. Are there any questions from the online audience? And do we need a microphone for the in-room audience? Oh, thank you so much. I've a hand right over here. Just put your hand up if you have a question, and we ask that you speak into the microphone so that it ends up in the recording. Thank you.
Okay, sadly, I don't know a lot about printing, especially in the 15th century, but or the 16th century. For those maps, you said they were hand carved in wood or copper or something. So does that mean that the people that did them needed to do them in mirror image? Wow. Okay.
Yep. Yep. I was
We've
going to
got
say it's more complicated than
The
it
question
was.
over here. Thanks.
I have a follow-up about the maps. You had mentioned wood blocks and engraving. Are those plates or blocks in existence? You know, can these images be recreated, or have they been lost to time?
So I think there are some presses like the Planten Press in Antwerp, right? That still has quite a few objects, so copper plates from the 16th, but then more in the 17th century and onwards. So that does exist, but it's very rare. So the plantain press, partly because it has a continuous existence. I think there's something about, you can tell that 1511 map that I showed you. Let me go. I'm just not quite sure how to just speed through here. I think it's this one. You can tell whether it's a first or second printing, because in the second printing, they're using blocks that were damaged by fire. And so you can see certain voids on them, or, or places where it's messed up compared to the first printing. So that's how historians of the book can tell different editions, but that doesn't mean that it still exists now, right? So yeah, so it's very rare. It does happen, but not often.
Question. I remember seeing books by the Folio Society. Are they or any of those other fine presses still in business?
The Folio Society is thriving. And in fact, it just released an amazing looking edition of the books by George Martin on the Game of Thrones, including the prequel that has recently been published. I mean, they're astonishing looking. So they are still in publication. I think you can get it for $150 or something like that. I think the prequel costs $150. The entire set of the others is probably a bit more. I know they said in affordable prices for every man, but I think they had delusions of grandeur for that. Their idea of every man was a little biased. Yes.
Was there a follow-up here in the front?
So I'm going to follow up on the pricing. If you're looking for these books as a collector, what are you paying for these editions that are well outside of the common pricing structure?
We pay a significant amount. It entirely depends on the edition. How many copies are known to survive? What condition is the volume in? Does it have its cover or its slipcase if it was published with one? Because if it's complete and almost untouched, it's going to cost a lot more than if it was used or read. If someone famous has signed it, it's going to cost more depending on who it is. If the artist has signed it, it's going to cost more. So it really varies from edition to edition. But let me tell you, no matter how much we pay for those, it is nothing to what we pay for the books in the James Ford Bell Library.
Any other questions?
There's one over here.
Oh, and one over here.
I just have a question about the little creepy windhead people. Can you tell us? I kind of love them and don't want them to come alive. So are there like little, like there's the little red print, are those names of just the wind, like, like the Alberta Clippers, or what are those?
Yeah, they are, in this case, they are mostly directional. So which direction the wind is coming from, rather than having it like a nickname sort of. Yeah.
I'm gonna zoom in on one.
Yeah,
If I can find it.
Yeah.
I can't find.
oh, yeah.
Okay, you do.
Yeah, so the Zephyr, the Zephyr of May.
So.
And
So-
Occidents means Occident and Orient. It means west, yes. Yeah. Septem is north over here. Oh, yeah, you can't see me pointing.
Yeah.
In the middle.
Here they look like infants.
Yeah.
But we have some maps. We have another edition of Ptolemy's maps where they're elderly and several have glasses.
Yeah.
Are there any fine presses that you currently subscribe to and get all of their new publications?
There are.
Do you recall the name?
I do. The Granary Press is one of those. We get everything that the Whittington Press produces, including their archives. And we just finished negotiating to acquire the wood blocks and the files and things for one of their premier artists who worked almost exclusively working on Whittington productions. We get the Beeler Press, we have Golden Cockerel Press we try to acquire. I don't think we automatically get those, but there's several, and it's really an amazing collection of small and fine press books. I encourage you to make an appointment to see them.
We did an exhibit on the Whittington Press in 2020. No, it's like 15 or 14 or 15, which is on the exhibit site if anyone wants to see it. It's an amazing collection.
So I was noticing as you were putting up images of the rare books that a lot of them had catchphrases still. And I was wondering when I saw that final picture, are they, along with historical methods of type font and those things, also doing the traditional method of printing? And do they come then with uncut pages?
We do have some with uncut pages, particularly editions of the Kelmscott Press and the Shakespeare Head Press. I found some that are uncut, and I'm trying to decide if I should cut them or not. If I was a collector for the sake of collecting, I would not cut them. But we want scholars to actually study these works, and you can't do that if you have to try to peer between the pages with uncut. So I'll be consulting our conservators about them.
Did I get the name right for the small press of Abattoir?
Yes, you did, George.
Okay, and so is there a story behind that?
I couldn't find one, but I did look. I suspect that that professor had an interesting sense of humor. Oh, sorry.
Could you say something about the conservation of the papers and how that relates to the overall collection? How you receive something that may be in poor condition or questionable condition, and then you have to, I don't want to say restore it, but keep it in a way that you can actually have it in the collection.
Sure. You do that? Okay. For both collections, we try to acquire only materials in excellent condition, so that we don't have to incur the cost of restoring them, because that does change the item. But also, the better the condition they start with, the more they'll last, especially when we have researchers and students using them. If we do get something that isn't in great condition, especially something that's been donated to us, for example, we do have conservators on staff who will look at it. We try to do the minimum amount necessary to make the item usable. If we can, I mean, we don't pay much money for something that's not in very good condition. And if it's not worth restoring, but it's still usable, we move it into a teaching collection. So the teaching collections are things that it's the second or third copy of something, it's in bad condition, it has no monetary value. So we will take that to schools when we go to visit schools, because so many schools can't come here anymore. It's too expensive to rent buses and things, especially grade schools. So we have a selection of teaching materials that we can take and they can still hold an 18th century book, for example, of Captain Cook or something like that. It just has no monetary value. So it's sort of a fine line, but we put them in special containers if they need to be protected. So a lot of our fine press books are in boxes that we've made so they don't get dirty on the shelf. And you saw some of the images where they've been covered in a cellophane to prevent them from getting dirty on the shelf. So we take all of those things into consideration, but we try not to acquire anything in the first place that requires a lot of intervention. One more.
Yeah, just in regard to that last point, as a matter of definition, is there any material that would count as both fine press and be printed on post 1875 high acid wood pulp paper?
Generally speaking, no. But there is a category called artist books, which have a lot of the principles of fine press. But their point is more about the art than the content. And sometimes those will use modern papers as part of the point of what they're trying to make. So they know that they are making a piece of art in the form of a book that is ephemeral. And so that's where we tend to see some of the less expensive papers. But now almost everything is printed on acid-free paper. You know, unlike the paperbacks that line our shelves for those of us of a certain age, that are turning brown and falling apart, modern books now, unless they're really, really inexpensive editions, are all printed on acid-free papers so that they will last.
Thank you for the fascinating questions, everyone. Really appreciate it. Just gonna wrap us up here for a moment. So if you are interested in a tour, Chris is right over here, so you can just meet her over on this side of the room. We have some exhibits in our galleries that we invite you to visit. Across the hall in the main gallery, the Northwest Architectural Archives exhibit, Making Room, Women's Histories from the Northwest Architectural Archives. And then literally down below us, inside the Wallen Center, Campus Kiosk, the voice of student groups at the U. And that is in the Bell Gallery, which is inside the Wallen Center. And you can take the elevator at the back of the building to go down and see that. So thanks for attending. And please join us again on May 2nd for the final set of presentations for this season from the Charles Babbage Institute Archives and the Givens Collection of African American Literature and Life. Thank you very much for attending.